the Justice Department for a commission that Paula was the co-chair of. And this is an issue that's near and dear to my heart because it was a major initiative that the administration engaged in. And this was, how do we consult with Congress regarding arms sales? And quite frankly, my view is that when I came in, this process was broken, meaning that you would go up to Congress to consult on an arms sale, and there was an unbounded period of time that that the staff could take to look at an arms sale. And if they didn't say yes, it just was halted. And it could be months. And this was not just sensitive sales. It could be a sale to the United Kingdom, or a sale to France, or a sale to Germany, that for reasons that may not even relate to policy, could be held up for 60 days, 90 days. So it didn't make sense. It didn't make sense because it didn't offer reliability to industry. And it didn't force, if there were foreign policy issues, there was no forcing function to address those issues. And so we, with Secretary Clinton's support, we initiated a new system for consulting on arms sales, both the foreign military sales as well as the export control reform changes and moving items from the USML to the CCO. And what we've done is we've said, if it is a sale to our closest allies, first of all, we're going to give you information earlier in the process. So you'll see this information earlier than you've ever seen it before. Even before we come up to formally consult with you, you'll know that you'll see the licenses in the computer system, that they've come in. On the FMS side, we'll give it to you earlier as well. So you'll know what's coming. And we've also used the classified Javits report. We refined to really focus on the sales that we thought they should would be eligible for sales in the coming year, and use that process of consultation to try and determine where Congress might have concerns, so that we could prepare, if there was a sale that was going to have concerns, to be prepared to brief it. But we said, if it's a sale to our closest allies, our NATO allies, we'll give you 20 days even before we notify. Under the law, we have to give Congress 30 days. We'll give you 20 days in advance of that. And at the end of the 20 days, if we haven't heard from you, we're going to move it forward. And this is, again, to our closest allies. If it's not a NATO ally, it'll be 30 days. For the sensitive sales, and that includes most Middle East sales, we'll take 40 days, and then we'll check in with you and just make sure that you're okay. And the results has been that the times have gone down. And last year was the first year, and we were a bit more tentative in starting, so I think the times are going to go down even more this year. And at the end of the day, and I want to emphasize this, if a member raises an objection, we will stop the sale, and we will consult. We will stop the notification, and we have committed that we will consult with that member before we move the sale. So this is not about limiting Congress's authority over arms sales. It's about introducing a degree of predictability, reliability, and a forcing function to have that conversation take place. And it puts pressure, a timeline on me that after 40 days on a sensitive sale, we've gotten nowhere. We need to call the staff director and say, where are we? And if the member has a problem, it's good to know that, because then we can engage. And, we can bring in, a briefing team to address those concerns. So I think that some in Congress thought that we would, start notifying sales that were controversial and that would lead to introduction of resolutions of district rule. And that's not in our interest. It's not in our interest to have resolutions of district rule on arms sales. So we want to be sure that it is going to get through the Hill. We very much value the consultation process with Congress, because they have expertise as well, and it's important for us to hear, about their concerns. So I think that we've struck the right balance between introducing predictability and reliability into the process, but at the same time, still allowing Congress to play the significant role that the law provides in advising on arms sales and allowing them the opportunity to weigh in on sensitive arms sales.
Let's go this side, second row, right there next to Allison.
Andrew, Jeff Smith with Arnold & Porter, and I join everybody else here who congratulates you on your tenure. Everybody I speak to gives you very high marks. I'd like to take you back to China in two areas that I think are in your area of responsibility. One is how you think about arms sales to China, given the dynamic in the region, and secondly, military-to-military relations between the U.S. and China.
Well, we don't formally sell arms to China. We sell them to Taiwan, of course, and we've had two significant arms sales to packages during my tenure, during the Obama administration's first term, and so billions of dollars worth of arms sales, which are designed to meet our obligations under the Taiwan Relations Act, and are consistent with it. And we've managed, and obviously the Chinese do not particularly like our arms sales to China, but I think that we have been able to manage the relationship with China while ensuring that we have delivered significant capability to Taiwan. And this administration remains committed to the United States obligations under the Taiwan Relations Act. On the mill-to-mill relations, I mean, this is DoD has repeatedly said that it would like to further develop our military-to-military relationship with China. General Dempsey, I believe, is going to be headed to China, and I'm sure this will be a topic of discussion. And I think that the value of military-to-military relations is that having those channels and relationships can be helpful if a crisis should emerge, or if there is a sensitive issue that emerges. And it makes miscalculation less likely if you have had those types of communications and consultations. So I think that it's something that DoD will continue to pursue, and obviously from the State Department perspective, we support that.
Time for probably one more question. Second row right here. Very persistent.
Hi, Emily Kadeo with CQ Roll Call. And I wanted to take you back to Pakistan because you mentioned the PCCF, but in the President's FY14 request, that's been zeroed out. So I wanted to ask you about the rationale for that, and also sort of going forward, what our military cooperation with Pakistan might look like and our counterinsurgency cooperation.
Well, we've been talking with the Pakistanis about the future, nature of our security assistance. And in one sense, we had delivered a significant amount of equipment under the program to help them develop counterinsurgency capability. And in our internal review, in a time of budgetary pressure, as well as in our discussion with the Pakistanis, we determined that the program had accomplished its objectives, and we would focus our assistance elsewhere. We still have requests for foreign military financing for Pakistan, our discussions now with Pakistan are about the best use of our foreign military financing to help meet our shared challenges.
One last question. Kevin, very enthusiastic.
Kevin Sheehan, Multiplier Capital. One of the few areas of increased defense activity going forward is going to be cybersecurity, which is going to call for a new type of service member, lots more programs, increase in offensive capabilities. What does this mean for the Political Military Affairs Bureau? Is there some new organization required? Is there some new set of skills that you're going to have to develop in your officers? How are you going to cope with this?
It's a great question. And actually, the State Department under Secretary Clinton now has a cyber coordinator who focuses on, because cyber, there's the defense aspect, there's the economic aspect, there's the legal aspect. There's so many different issues that cut across so many different equities that it was determined that it was important to have a coordinator. So we feed into that coordinator on these types of issues. So, for example, my organization provides a political foreign policy advisor to the Cybercom commander, and which ensures we stay well linked. When it comes to DoD planning, I have an office in my Bureau Policy Plans office, which helps coordinate state input into DoD planning. So that's sort of my piece of it. But all these various issues and the cross-cutting way they interact did require the State Department to create a new organization that a coordinator that works with all the different bureaus which have equities in cyber. You're absolutely right that there's a lot of issues related to cyber, and we feed into the cyber coordinator's efforts.
We have time for one last question here in the second row right here. Very patiently waiting.
Thank you. Diane Boberchuk with Center for Naval Analysis. You talked a lot about security assistance with high-profile countries and situations, but I was wondering what you think the most important country with respect to security assistance relationship is that's not on most people's radar screens right now.
Well, I would say not necessarily a country, but I think one of the great success stories is our assistance to Amazon, which was the organization that was involved in the fighting in Somalia. And that was a case, and it's a real model for us. That was a case where we didn't have U.S. Soldiers on the ground fighting al-Shabaab, but we used our security systems to help other countries in the fight against al-Shabaab. And it was successful. Al-Shabaab, is on the run, and it could provide a real model for Mali. In a similar way, we don't want to put U.S. soldiers on the ground, in Mali, but we can provide the assistance to the surrounding nations to have the capacity to be able to counter the extremists in northern Mali.
Great. With that, I'd like to thank all the participants, reminding you that we were all on the record, and please ask you to join me in thanking and congratulating the Assistant Secretary on his tenure.
Next on C-SPAN, we'll talk to Ken Burns about his latest documentary. Then a rally for citizenship for illegal immigrants. And Veterans Affairs Secretary Eric Shinseki on Capitol Hill testifying about his agency's annual budget.
I really learned this week how humanizing politics is. It's about people that really interact, and that we learned that we can do this. We're all capable of being leaders of our country, and it's about working together and finding common ground.
Before this program, I really wasn't all that optimistic about the future because, like Jay said, all the media shows is the negative aspects about the future. And I think this program really made us all more optimistic about the future and more positive about where our country is going.
We get the negative opinion from all the news media, whether it's MSNBC on the left or Fox on the right. But the fact of the matter is that every day they're working together. Justice Kagan is able to put aside her differences and go hunting with Justice Scalia, and our senators are able to eat lunch together, and it happens every single day.
I feel like President Obama summed this up perfect yesterday. He was saying that our country has always been in turmoil throughout its history, but we as people has always found a way to get through it. And I'm not saying I'm not worried about the future and we don't have some problems that we need to fix. But when I look around this room, I see 103 minds who want to make a difference for this country, want to do good. And I'm sure there's plenty of other people that are around our age that want to make a difference and want to do good. So I believe that we will be able to solve the problems that we face today.
Each year, high school students from across the country meet in Washington as part of the Senate Youth Program. This year, they met with leaders from all three branches of government, including President Obama, Justice Elena Kagan, and Senator Richard Burr. Hear their insights from the week. Sunday night at 8 on C-SPAN's Q&A.
You're watching C-SPAN 2 with politics and public affairs. Weekdays featuring live coverage of the U.S. Senate. On weeknights, watch key public policy events. And every weekend, the latest nonfiction authors and books on Book TV. You can see past programs and get our schedules at our websites. And you can join in the conversation on social media sites.
Filmmaker Ken Burns has a new documentary that will air soon on PBS. We talked to him about it on Friday's Washington Journal.
Ken Burns, documentary filmmaker. His new project is The Central Park 5, airing on PBS next week. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Why did you decide to take on this story, and tell us about The Central Park 5?
Well, actually, this story began with my daughter, Sarah Burns, who is one of the co-directors. Her husband, the filmmaker David McMahon, is sort of the creative force behind this film, and they very kindly took me along on this extraordinary journey. My daughter got interested in it, got obsessed with it, I think. She has a fierce sense of fairness, and this is one of the great injustices of our times, and pursued it, wrote a book, and as she was writing the first pages of that book, we had an opportunity to look over her shoulder and say, this is a film. On April 19th, 1989, a young woman jogging in Central Park was brutally raped and left for dead. In the ensuing hours, 5 young African Americans, among other young African Americans and Hispanics, were rounded up, and eventually 5 of them were charged with this crime. They spent upwards of 30 hours in intense interrogations, usually without parents, definitely without lawyers, without food, with the classic, good cop, bad cop, intense interrogation by seasoned veterans. The 5 had never been in trouble before. They'd come from good, stable families, middle class, lower middle class families, and